Hi, Chris here. Word balloons are kind of a tricky thing for a variety of reasons. Word balloon placement is probably my favorite aspect of comics. There's so much that you can do with it. There's so much complexity to it. And I've got a lot of thoughts and principles that I feel are applicable. But today, or at least in this particular video, I'm only going to talk about one of them. And that is the plane that the balloon occupies. Now, the way that I treat word balloons is that I like to think of them as occupying the physical space next to the head of the character to whom they purport to belong. So if you've got a character, if I am the character here, for example, this is my word balloon. Hello. Wherever I am, that word balloon is there also. Now, that doesn't mean that the word balloon shrinks if the character rescinds into the background plane, or gets larger if the character is in the extreme foreground. It's still going to be the size necessary to fit the dialogue inside and no bigger, unless you're whispering and you want it to be really tiny. Another thing. But it does mean that you have to treat the word balloon. You don't have to, but I feel like you should. That the word balloon needs to be on the same plane as the character, which is usually not going to be an issue unless you have foreground elements that come into play that cause an issue with the characters. So I was gonna marker board this, but the reason I bring this up is because have a panel that I was working with that I noticed a problem springing up that is a direct result of an infringement of this particular principle. And so my thought was to rectify it in a public sphere to illustrate this concern. So I don't know why I brought this marker board down. I guess just in case I needed to, but I don't. So here's the issue that I'm having. I have a sequence in which a number of characters are walking into a courtyard. Now, this courtyard, which was sort of designed to fit some narrative needs, is visible in this particular picture, and it's this area back here. It's part of this temple. Now, the problem is I get to this sequence, and there are going to be two extended scenes that take place in this particular courtyard, and I haven't really designed the courtyard. You only see this tiny snippet of it. I had to sort of reverse engineer this, and so a little while ago I sketched this out and watercolored it so I could keep track of what was what for when I do the drawing. And so this is what this courtyard is going to look like. It's got this grass area. I kept forgetting like which side the trees were on and things like that, so I had to change that. I also, after drawing it, realized there wasn't nearly enough visual information to showcase something that's going to be important, which is that this courtyard is going to go from, in the first scene in which takes place in it, is going to sort of showcase this idyllic garden type of situation, and later on it's going to be all but destroyed, and there's thematic reasons for that, and I kind of want it to look as though it's been razed. So I realized this wasn't nearly amped up enough to showcase how bad the damage later on would be. So I came up with having these little paper lanterns in there and figuring out where they would go. And then this is sort of the design of how they'll go. So they'll be crisscrossing the whole thing. Okay, so that's the background. Now this is the particular setup. I will, because word balloon placement is so important to me, and because it's the word balloons themselves are such an intrinsic part of the composition of the image, then I need to make sure that they're exactly the right size. So I have placeholder font. I'll be hand lettering this, but this is sort of sized to the what I'll be doing hand lettering. I have this placeholder font that I print out and cut out and then can maneuver around until I find the perfect solution. Excuse me. Now here is the difficulty that I have. I like this setup. I drew this little this thing here first so that I could put him underneath so that this wouldn't obfuscate these poles. But if you look at this image here, this particular wall is fairly short. It has enough space for these two trees, and then it bumps up immediately into this wall, which subsequently bumps up into this cliff. Now, the problem with this image, as you can see, is that I've spaced these out, and at first I had it going all the way to here, and then I have this cliff moving, but from a staying on model standpoint, that basically doubles the amount of space that this wall has. And I don't want to do that. But the other difficulty is that you see this line here. This was me trying to extend this cliff face out to where it would be more on model. But the difficulty with that is now that this character who is walking through the door, her word balloon now overlaps this cliff face. And that to me is unacceptable because it breaks that plane rule that I have, saying that while this is sort of in the midground, there's no real foreground in this image. Everything is very far away from the audience. If the audience is their own plane, I like to treat the audience as the foreground plane. And so if the audience wouldn't be able to physically interact with this, were this, say, a window, however you want to look at it, then you don't necessarily have a foreground plane. You may have multiple planes rescinding in space, but there's not technically a foreground here. Okay, so what I've done in order to fix this is I've tried a couple of different methods of placement. So this one sort of is probably as much as it's going to do. I'm going to break up her bit of dialogue, which is why it's a secret garden. I ain't seen a place so pretty since I don't know when. This character is a former cowboy, or cowgirl, however you want to look at it. She's a gunslinging performer, an Annie Oakley type. So she speaks in sort of this antiquated rural drawl, which is inconsequential to what we're talking about. So these are the alternatives here. Spaced out the second part a few different ways. So now what I'm going to do is cut these out. And see if I can't figure out a better placement to where I can bring that cliff face in without obscuring the word balloons and have those word balloons operate the way that I want them to. Let me see if I can save some time. I think that this top one is going to be my best bet. So I'm not going to bother with the second and third one unless this top one fails to produce the effects that I desire. And this is going to work. Let me pan this down so that it's a little more visible. I also don't like there to be a bump up here, so I'm extending the edge of the door to where it has space. Let me switch to a blue pencil. I'll be going over this in graphite shortly, which will make a big difference. But Now that is going to work. And now I can extend that cliff face to where those are not going to conflict. And that's pretty much it. I finished the pencils. I went over it with graphite. So you can see here what the final outcome looks like. You've got the cliff over on this side. You have this. This isn't obscured by either the little pole that holds up the lanterns or the cliff. And all in all, I'm happy with how that turned out. It's the sort of thing I go through probably about every 2 days or so. Sometimes I'll plan it a little bit better. If I thumbnail, I tend to avoid these problems. I'm working straight to pencils on this particular book just because the pages are so compact that thumbnails kind of give me an unfair illusion as to what I can likely expect to be able to put onto the page. Anyway, hope that helps. Hope that explains sort of one of the many things that you've got to think about when you're doing balloon placement. That's it.